Today's episode of Non-Toxic Environments is brought to you by the Green Design Center. Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. This is Andy Pace. So happy to be here today with you. I know it's been a while. It's been a few weeks. My apologies. Been actually doing a lot of interviews with other podcasters, other influencers in the industry, and trying to spread the word of healthy homes to just about every corner of the globe. And it's going well. We've got several shows that will be airing soon, if not already available. I'll put some links in the show notes to some of the shows that I've done. You know, the interesting thing about this weekend, first of all, it's Memorial Day weekend, and so I hope everybody gets a chance to not only enjoy the holiday weekend, a long holiday weekend, but also reflect on the meaning of it and think about those who paid the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedoms here in the United States. So in thinking about today's show, I started thinking back, and my father was in the military, and he sacrificed quite a bit to be where he is today, but I think about many years ago when I first got into this business, and so it actually dawned on me that we are now in our 30th year of doing healthy home consulting, material supply, you name it. And I thought today would be an interesting show just to kind of look back in these 30 years, kind of see where we came from and where we're going. And so we're talking about 1982, all right? 1982 is when I first was introduced to the product line AFM Safe Coat out of California. And I'm sure you've heard this story a million times if you've listened to any of my shows or if you've listened to any of the interviews I've done. But I found AFM because of a project we were doing in Milwaukee where we were supplying a water-based epoxy coating for a parking garage and ended up with several of our own workers being rushed to the hospital because of inhalation complications. And they literally couldn't breathe. And we needed to find a way to not only finish the project, but also then continue selling into the construction market without poisoning our customers and our workers. And we found AFM, and we found this company who really specialized in selling non-toxic paints and coatings into a world of, medical doctors, allergy relief shops, small little specialty stores across the country, and we wanted to mainstream it. My background was architecture and commercial construction, and I felt that the entire construction community needed to know about Safe Coat. And have we done that in the last 30 years? No, we haven't. The construction industry is a behemoth. But I will say that not only have we, but many others who have now grabbed that torch over the years have really started to make a dent, and I'm very, very proud of that. So 1992, let's just look back a little bit for those who were around in 1992, those of our listeners, and for those who were born after 92, this might be a little history lesson for you. So in 1992, George H.W. Bush and Boris Yeltsin actually jointly announced that the Cold War had ended. Bill Clinton was elected president. Jeffrey Dahmer was sent to prison. I'm just going down a list of these things that are very interesting. The first smartphone was invented and brought out by IBM. 1992, the first smartphone, which makes sense because I don't think I built my first website for the company until 1995. So for the first 3 years, we were just relying on word of mouth, telephone sales, old-fashioned mail order sales. If you don't know what that is, ask your folks. In 1992, Pepsi started test marketing Crystal Pepsi, and then they got rid of it right away because it was horrible. Silence of the Lambs was the top Academy Award winner of a movie. Johnny Carson had his last show in 1992. And then some other interesting things. Prime rate for interest rate was about 6%. It's kind of close to what it is now. Gallon of gas was $1.13, not close to what it is now. So 1992, 30 years ago, long ways away. From the standpoint of our industry, 1992 was, it seems like light years away. Again, I didn't make my first website until 1995. And the website that I made was absolutely horrible, but I had to do it, and at the time there weren't companies that we knew of very easily that made websites for companies. Nowadays, probably kids under the age of 15 specialize in this. But it was interesting. In 1992, after I found AFM, in order to do research and to learn more about the industry, I actually had to go to the library and check out books, read books that were written on the subject. And there weren't many, I'll tell you. I had to go to an encyclopedia called the Thomas Register. The Thomas Register was the encyclopedia of manufacturers in the country. And so I went through the Thomas Register. I probably took 2 or 3 weeks going to the library 4 times a week to write down names and contact numbers and addresses for manufacturers that I thought might be able to make products that would fall into the same family of materials that we were hoping to develop. 1992, we had AFM. In 1993, 94, we started working with a company called Forbo Marmoleum, if you know that product. Marmoleum is a natural linoleum. It's made the same way today as they made it 140 years ago. So we found them through the Thomas Registry. We developed this mail order catalog, and I probably still have copies of it somewhere. But this mail order catalog was full of more of allergy relief type materials. I was looking at some of the names that were doing this already. There was a company called Needs in New York. They still exist today. Fantastic. There was a company called Non-Toxic Environments in New Hampshire, and we actually assumed that company over time, and now it's morphed into the name's been used for our podcast. There was a company called Building for Health in Colorado, Cedar Rose, and if you've been in this business, if you've lived this lifestyle for a long time, you know Cedar. And several years ago, we acquired her company when she decided to retire and brought a number of her materials into the mix. There was a company called Allergy Relief Shop in Tennessee. There's an environmental health store in New York. There's one in Seattle, one in Portland. And then there was the Environmental Health Foundation in Texas that had a store selling Safe Coat and some other materials. And then the Builders Wholesale Supply in Iowa, they kind of did what we did. They morphed their company into Green Building Supply. And I remember traveling to Fairfield, Iowa, and visiting with Joel and his wife and his family, and talking with them about this years ago. There have been a lot of stores that have come and gone. Steve Kopacki up in Minnesota, Michigan, with energy and environmental concepts. Steve was a customer, a friend, a mentor in this business. And matter of fact, I just got a chance to talk with him a few weeks ago, and I hope to have him on the show to talk about the old times. I'm sure I'm missing folks, people. There are many more, of course, many more, but these are the ones that I remember when I was young in the business. It's interesting. When I started, I was 21 years old, and now I'm 52, and it's going to be 52. It's interesting. It's interesting to think back and think at one point that I was just an infant in this industry, in this business, trying to learn all about this, and to this day now, I'm one of the old timers, and I'm still happy to report that I still learn from every one of my customers on a daily basis more about the problems with chemical sensitivity, mold sensitivity, all sorts of immune disorders. And when I talk to clients all over the world, it brings me more information that I can help with the next person. So after we got AFM and Forbo, and then we have this catalog selling cleaning materials and selling different deodorizers. We started working with a company in Canada called Deodorock. We've actually had the owner of the company on the show here before, and Deodorock is a natural zeolite material that absorbs odors and pollutants. And what makes it unique is that it can be recharged by putting it outside, and sunlight recharges it. And so we still sell that product today. As a matter of fact, we sell Forbo today. Most of the products we dealt with back then, the good ones that we really aligned ourselves with, we still sell today. But I remember what was really interesting back in the early 90s was there was a company out of Texas called the Hummers. And the Hummers, if anybody remembers this, please reach out and tell me your experience with them. But the Hummers was really interesting. They're actually the first company to put together a giant catalog of hundreds of manufacturers that they distributed. And they essentially sold their catalog to stores looking to become retailers of eco-friendly materials. It's a really interesting concept. And I think that led the way for us when we developed Green Design Center, and we actually developed it as a sort of a quasi-franchise where we had started working with individuals all over the country to become green design centers in their own area. We took everything we had, we kind of boiled it down, and at this point it was in digital form, but we were able to work with professionals and other retailers to essentially put a green design center inside of their own facility. And, we worked with that for quite a while. Decided that after a period of time, we decided that business model just wasn't going to work because the internet was becoming so strong. There was so much going on online that we realized that mail order sales, internet sales, phone sales, it's just becoming the norm. And now we still have a green design center we work with up in northern Wisconsin. Heidi has been a green design center for, a decade or so, longer probably. And she does wonderful up there. But we just don't pursue the GDC concept anymore because it's just, it's kind of, at this point, irrelevant. It's, the internet has made us closer to all of our customers. And then with the pandemic, that has made normal the idea of buying things like flooring materials and mattresses and cars and even houses through the mail or through the internet. I spend a lot of my time with consulting clients going through Zillow and Redfin listings, looking at houses with them. This was never thought of 5 years ago, or much less 30 years ago. So it's interesting. It's the way the internet has really changed things. And in 1995, when I made the first website for our company, I kind of did it as a goof, thinking like, well, I suppose I should do this. Let's see what happens. And nowadays, it's just, this is the way it has to be. So 30 years ago to today, what has changed? What's remained the same? I can honestly say that in the industry, what has changed is when the U.S. Green Building Council came around and created the LEED program back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it really started putting a focus on green and eco-friendly construction. Kind of took away from the human health aspect of things. But the unintended consequence is it actually ended up shedding light on the human health issue. The lack of attention to it became attention to it. So it's kind of the irony of it. From a commercial standpoint, from a consumer standpoint, what's changed since 1992? Well, in the beginning phase of the company and the industry, people who were buying materials from us were people who absolutely had no other choice. These were folks that were living in rooms of their homes coated with aluminum foil, with Denny foil back before it went out of business, and needed that to make sure there was no chemical off-gassing that could cause problems for them. Today, most of my clients are people who aren't that way. Most of my clients are people who either have lower sensitivities and they don't want them to become worse, or families that have other siblings or kids that have sensitivities and they're just trying to protect themselves. I think that the pandemic has also made it so that people feel more empowered to actually discuss human health and even recognize when there's problems. A really remarkable thing happened earlier this year when a customer of mine wrote an article for Men's Health magazine. And it shed light on the myth of, who's affected by chemical sensitivity. I would say in 30 years average, 75 to 80% of my client base has been female. Now, studies show that from an actual health reaction standpoint, men are more likely to be chemically sensitive than women are. But women have the innate ability to recognize when something is not right and actually say something and do something about it. Guys, what do? We ignore it. It's just a cold. I just got the sniffles. No big deal. But when Mike Bender wrote this article for Men's Health magazine and about his own struggles since being a kid with sensitivities, it opened the eyes of a lot of people. And I am getting men now all over the world reaching out and saying, I've got sensitivities and I need some help. So I think that's been a remarkable difference this year. But looking back in the past 30 years, the difference is people are really more aware of it. They're more willing to talk about it. One thing that hasn't changed, contractors. I know I harp on this every single episode, but contractors still are resisting the need to change. Now, don't get me wrong. We do have some that we work with across the country. I've got one here in Wisconsin that I've done several projects with, a company called JFK Design Build. They do wonderful work. We've got, JS2 down in Texas that we work with. I've worked with, green home builders in Illinois. I've worked with custom home builders in North Carolina and Florida, just all over the country. And again, I'm missing some. I apologize if your company wasn't named, but I work with so many people. But there are really good contractors now who will build you a healthy home. But the caveat is it takes somebody, and not to pat myself on the back, but it takes somebody like me or another consultant to make sure that the project goes smoothly. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily just the contractors, but their subs and suppliers, making sure that they're following the rules that we put together as well. So we've got that going for us. But for the most part, if you go to your remodeler and say, can you just use some healthier products? They usually resist it. And I have some wonderful jobs going on right now, and I've got some that are absolute nightmares where the contractors just don't care. And that's really difficult, not only for me, but it's worse for the client and what they're trying to achieve. So we've got some ways to go. We've got to encourage the industry to really accept the fact that there are some serious issues within the industry. I listened to another podcast yesterday done by a local builder, and I enjoy the show. For the most part, he's got interesting topics and so forth, but he actually talked about a show he went to recently where it's all about the future in home tech, and it was about wellness. He actually had a topic on wellness in the home. And you know what wasn't even talked about? The materials used. The materials used that can cause health issues. He never once mentioned it. And that's telling me that the industry is just not ready to admit fault. Now, on one hand, I can say I understand that because as a business owner, I look at my business and I say, well, if I'm opening myself to lawsuits, that's probably not good for the future of my business. And that's probably what they would do. If they would say, you know what, from this point on, we're going to build nothing but healthy homes. What does that say about all the hundreds of homes they built before that moment? It tells these homeowners that they're living in unhealthy homes. Whether they are or they aren't, it makes that inference. And so I understand the desire to protect and insulate yourself from this. On the other hand, we all know that the very first step in fixing something is admitting the problem, and so far the industry is just not admitting the problem. And all of us who are still out here vocalizing this and selling materials and helping customers, and there's not enough of us fighting the fight. We need the industry to start policing itself. All right, enough of the soapbox. 30 years, folks, I can't thank you enough. Everybody who's listening, everybody who's not listening, who's been a customer over the years, your family, your friends, kept us alive throughout some of the worst economic situations in our country. In 2008 to 2012, when the entire construction industry plummeted, and we had somewhere around 250 green stores across the country, and now we have maybe 20. We stayed in business. How? Because we have loyal customers. Throughout the pandemic, how do we stay in business? Loyal customers. And it helps that we have a history. It helps that we have this knowledge base that not many others have. But honestly, folks, it's always all because of you. And the absolute best thing that's happened to me in the last 30 years is you all. Honestly. I was asked a while back for a podcast, what keeps me going every day? I face a lot of your situations. I deal with a lot of people who have serious health issues, and it gets frustrating, and it gets it's kind of a demotivator sometimes. Being kind of an empath, I'll take on what they're giving, and it's tough. I mean, it's you all understand. You're dealing with it. You're living with it. But what keeps me going is when I get into the office every morning and I get an email or a voicemail from a client just saying thank you. We can live in our home. I had, in the last couple weeks, I've received so many emails from past clients just out of the blue saying, because of you and because of your company and everybody at GDC, we've been able to live in our home. And I know that's not the case with everybody. I mean, we try as hard as we can, and some things just don't work out. There's things out of our control, but honestly, it's those well wishes we get that make me continue to do it. And I have, in 30 years now, I have never been more motivated to keep going than I am right now today. And because of this show, because of my consulting clients, because of folks we're helping all over the world to build, you all are keeping me going, and I appreciate that. You're all educating me. You're teaching me. You're keeping me on my toes. I've got to learn about new ideas and new technologies because you all are doing your due diligence and then coming to me saying, what do you think of this? And so I appreciate that. So we're going to keep this going. I hope to keep this going for another 30 years. We'll see. We'll see. But I have no intention of going anywhere, folks. It's only going to get stronger. It's going to get better. We'll get more materials available for you, more selections, and we will continue to pound on the doors of the builders and the other influencers in the industry and make this a healthy home industry, not just a home building industry, but a healthy home building industry. That's it today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Memorial Day. Think of those who allowed us to be here today because of their sacrifices, and have a safe and healthy weekend. We'll get back to you hopefully next week. Take care, everyone.